Welcome to Scoreography, an accessible and enthusiastic celebration of the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I am Wendy Buske. I am a lifelong figure skating fan going back to the 1980s, and I'm here with my husband, who I brought along with me into skating fandom, Adron Buske.
Kicking and screaming.
All the way.
Yeah, that's not actually true. I personally was not indoctrinated much into skating until we got together. But I very quickly learned to appreciate the sport. And over the last 14 years or so, I've become all in on it.
And we have been podcasters for a long time, but in a totally different space. And I wanted to talk about skating because really it is my super fandom. And it has been since I was 4 years old.
And what we wanted to do with this show is have a forum for a really open and enthusiastic, excited fandom for figure skating.
Right, exactly. I know so many people that love the sport, have an awareness of the sport, only watched when it was the Nancy Tanya drama, or only watched during the Olympics. And all of that is valid. You can love it from afar. You can think it's funny. You can think it's really beautiful. You can be a super fan. You can be a casual. It really doesn't matter. I want it to kind of be accessible to anyone who just wants to hear about skating.
Scoreography is really kind of aimed at the casual fan all the way up to the veteran fan of the sport. There are other shows out there about skating, obviously, and we watch and listen to some of them, but they're oftentimes very deep in the weeds. And I was really lucky as a person coming into this sport that I had you to sit there and explain things to me because even now, after watching the sport for 14 years and really getting passionate about it over the last 10, I think, I can't necessarily tell you what a salchow versus a toe loop versus a toe versus,
that's what YouTube's for.
Right. And definitely I still need to, I always know when it's an axle, but it's things like that. But you were, here with me to explain the scoring and give me context for things. And that really helped me a lot. And I think sometimes that can just be really tricky for, any sport coming in and just watching it. You might be able to appreciate what you're seeing, but not necessarily the nuances of it.
Exactly. And skating, even at its best, it's polarizing and confusing. The scoring system doesn't make a ton of sense. The skaters that you watch and think are perfect, then scoring badly is upsetting, confusing, and sometimes just makes you want to, throw away any interest in the sport. It's a challenging thing to actually love because it's fantastic, beautiful, but also super controversial all the time. And if you like drama, it's here for you.
Well, the fastest way for any sport to lose viewers and fans is to be confusing from a rule standpoint and to feel unfair.
Yeah, that's fair. And
skating can struggle with that sometimes because it is a judged sport.
Right.
The name of the show, which we have blatantly ripped off of Johnny Weir's, in his commentary, he always refers to the scoreography box, which means the score for the choreography, because this is a sport that is both art and athleticism. So you have
Can we say that we're paying homage to Johnny and not ripped him off?
We are paying him. He coined a phrase and we are running with it.
Yes.
And thank you,
Johnny.
And I
love you, Johnny.
Yes. And we love Johnny and Tara and Terry Gannon as the commentators. I know not everybody does in the, out in the skating world, but for us, they're so enjoyable. Mm-hmm. But all of that aside, for this first episode, we're jumping right into the 2022-23 season.
Yes.
When we're recording this, it's the day after the end of Skate America, mm-hmm. which was October 21st through 23rd. And that's the first big event here in the United States.
It's really the first big event internationally of the season.
Right. And it's part of what's called the Grand Prix. I have a vague idea of what the Grand Prix is because we've watched skating all this time, but I don't really have a completely thorough idea what it is. So can you kind of enlighten the listener who maybe doesn't know that?
Sure. Like any sport, you have your on season, your off season. We're just coming into the on season this fall for figure skating. And while there's other smaller international competitions that come before it that kind of are gearing up to the season, Skate America's been the kickoff, if you will, to the international skating season for decades. even before it was part of the Grand Prix, which only actually came to be in the late 90s, kind of after the Nancy Tanya explosion of popularity. The Grand Prix is a series of 6 international skating competitions that kicks off with Skate America this week. And then there will be 5 more that happen all over the world that kind of bring in all of the top senior level skaters internationally. They've all earned their spots there, or they've been delegated by their countries as their representatives. So at the end of this series of 6 events, the top 6 entrants, whether it's a single skater or a dance pair or a pairs team, go to the Grand Prix final, which is kind of like the second most important yearly international event for any skater. So World Championships being the ultimate every year. It's a big deal, and it really does allow skaters multiple international events to just basically gear up for their season and continue to figure out their programs and how they compare to other people in the world, and just allow them to really refine their programs and get better and better so that they ideally peak at the World Championships.
So with Skate America, like you said, kicks off Grand Prix. And I think for casual fans, people who are just kind of getting into the sport, what they may not realize is that only a fairly small number of the big events actually get televised.
Oh, yes.
There are lots and lots of smaller events that happen all over the States, all over the world, that never see air here. And then now it's also really difficult sometimes to figure out where things air here because they're on the USA channel or they're
Peacock
on NBC
or it's absurd.
I think it was like one time they stuck something on Bravo or something. I don't know. Like they scatter things all over the place, which gets really, really frustrating.
Yes.
But there are tons and tons of little shows where, you know, people are just getting their feet underneath them, or you have a lot of like lower level competitors that are just kind of getting their way into that senior level, higher level competition.
Right.
And sometimes big things happen at those small shows.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about some of that in a little bit when we get to the quad herd around the world with Ilia Malinin. But in this particular thing, like we said, we're talking about Skate America, that kickoff of the Grand Prix.
Well, and to be clear, too, especially for listeners that just watched the Olympics, saw, you know, Nathan Chen, the amazing Nathan Chen, win his Olympic title, who saw all of these brilliant, incredible performances, and then come into this season kind of thinking, okay, well, now I'm going to go watch Nathan Chen, or now I'm going to go watch Mariah Bell or Papadakis and Cicerone, all these phenomenal people, and they're gone. Maybe not forever, but they're gone right now. So Skate America is also the introduction of a brand new, what you'll often hear if you watch a lot of skating is the new quad, which
the Olympic cycle.
The Olympic cycle. So this is the introduction of a lot of young skaters and new faces, new people to kind of present themselves in a new way to judges to say, hey, I'm the one to watch, or I am among those to watch for the next 4 years. So it's weird because it's both the, hey, I just, you know, getting my feet wet and I want to make sure that, you know, I'm doing okay, but I'm not quite at my peak, because you don't want to peak too early. But it's also really important, especially for young skaters, because right now judges are looking for that next new person.
So the last Olympic cycle ended with the Olympics earlier this year.
Yeah.
And then
really with the World Championships.
Really with World Championships. Yeah.
That was like it was beautiful. But
well,
anyway.
For some people who might be listening to this might have watched skating for the first time or reinvigorated an interest in it with the Olympics, because that's often people's gateway
or
to
lost all interest because of the Valieva scandal. But, you know, that's a whole other story.
So, yeah, and we'll talk about that in a different episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Olympics were absolutely marred by the Valieva scandal and everything that happened with Russia. But there were also huge, fantastic performances at that. You know, not the least of which is Nathan Chen absolutely dominating in the men's and, you know, and winning his gold medal. And what a huge story that was. And we'll talk about that at another date as well.
Yeah.
But, you know, the challenge then is that for a lot of people, they saw the Olympics and that was the last that they saw of skating.
Correct.
Worlds happened not too long afterwards. A number of the big competitors that were part of the Olympics didn't go to Worlds. And then also Russia's war on Ukraine had started, which meant that the Russians as a nation have been barred from international athletic competition.
Correct.
So the Russians, having been such a dominant force in women's skating and also in
pairs
and ice dance, they were not a factor at Worlds, which opened up an enormous platform for a lot of other young skaters and
really established skaters that had been in the background for years. It was a really lovely competition, if I'm being honest. Like, yes, it's never something you want to see for athletes to lose the ability to compete because it's not their fault that their nation is at war. But that said, there's a lot of reasons to be happy that they weren't there. That sounds harsh. Nothing against any of them personally. Many of them are brilliant. But because of all of the doping scandals that have been pervasive in the sport for decades, it was sort of a relief to have a very obviously clean, if not filled with quads from the ladies, to be fair, competition where it was just you could watch and enjoy it and not be waiting for the next shoe to drop.
The Olympics ended on such a difficult note, and the mess that was the women's competition because of everything that happened.
It's just sad.
It was really sad. It was really sad to see a skater as great as Sherbakova win the gold and yet look hollow and lost, and to see a powerful and fiery and unpredictable skater like Trusova have a complete meltdown. So that Worlds that followed afterwards was this enormous breath of fresh air and was just so beautiful and fun and full of extraordinary performances from a lot of the names that we have not seen on that podium because of that Russian dominance. So
Skate America was this next opportunity for that group, anyone who's left who hasn't retired or isn't taking some time off, to come through and really begin their quest for potentially world medals. Again, since the war in Ukraine is still happening, Russia will not be competing at least at minimum, I believe, until 2023. And we'll see how long it goes. Obviously, it would be great if the war would be over. But
that would be the most important, preferable thing, yes.
Yes, for so many more important reasons. That said, right now, for all of those reasons, we are looking at at least one competitive season without them. And without going too much into the darkness of all of that, Skate America.
An important thing to keep in mind about this Skate America is that it is the first big international competition this year, in this season. And that means that a lot of the skaters that are in this are skating brand new programs, things that have maybe been performed in competition at very, very small events.
Right.
But in a few cases have never been seen by anybody. Like Chock and Bates, the ice dance team, this was their debut. It was like the first time out anybody got to see any of this.
They were dropping their singles.
Right. Yes. As Johnny and Tara like to compare them to Beyonce, or I guess maybe Taylor Swift, considering
that's more appropriate
this
right
moment
now.
In time. Yeah. More in the zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
But that just means that a lot of people that were going into it, their routines were not quite as refined yet. There's a lot of room to grow. Over the course of a season, as people tend to stick to their free skate and their short program over the course of an entire season, people grow into them. They make changes. They learn where things are breaking down or where they need to be improved. So right out the gate, usually there are some holes in the performances, and it's to be expected. In a few occasions, we saw people skate them nearly flawlessly, which was outstanding, and we'll talk about those. But we also saw a lot of people fall apart.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's inevitable right now. It's hard not to start with Ilia Malinin, because he is ultimately the story of Skate America this year. How do I even say this the right way without feeling like I'm being dismissive? It's like, he did a quad axel, the end. It's unbelievable. And I appreciate, like, I heard so many people, whether it was Tara Lipinski or Ashley Wagner or Johnny Weir, like all of these people saying the same phrase, that they didn't expect to see that in their lifetime. And I agree. I've been watching this sport since I was 4 years old, and 4.5 revolutions in the air perfectly clean is absurd. It is absurd. Yuzuru Hanyu, he's been trying it. He's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, icon of the sport. And the only reason he came back to the last Olympics was to land a quad axel, and he didn't. He's one of the greatest of all time, and even Yuzuru Hanyu couldn't do it. And this 17-year-old kid comes out and says, I got this. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
So the axel is one of the hardest jumps in skating. It's the only one that takes off going forward, which basically means it ends up having to have an additional half revolution to land at the end of the jump. Traditionally, the version that people could compete in competition was the triple axel. And it's worth noting, like, most of the women can't do it.
Yes. Do a triple axel, you're saying.
You're right. Yeah. Most women cannot do a triple axel. That tends to be the kind of the holy grail for a lot of the women. Even some of the Russian extraordinary wunderkinds that can land quads in the other jumps still struggle with the triple axel.
Right. Because it's essentially you're turning and jumping forward. It's sort of a blind turn. Like you're looking over your shoulder to jump up. It depends on the skater. There's a lot of skaters that adore the axle because of that entry being so different. But the momentum's totally different. And it is a very hard jump. For a long, long time before the quad revolution, that was the jump of every competition. Like you were waiting for every single skater to land their triple axel and you'd hold your breath until they got that. So to think it's 4.5 revolutions. So you can call it a quad, but it's really 4.5 now. So we're, I guess you'd say, halfway to a quint.
Yeah. So the other jumps, you have your Salchow, your toe loop, you know these better than I do. I can't handle.
And again, I advise if you're interested in learning, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there that describe all of these and show them to you really specifically. But there's the toe loop, the Salchow, the loop, the flip, the Lutz, and the axle. Those are your basic 6 jumps. There's also things called like a Euler and things like that, but that's getting too in the weeds.
Right. And so the axle's the only one that takes off going forward. And the axle was the only one that up until really like a month ago, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, the other jumps have all had quads, have all been 4 revolutions. But it's still really difficult. Not every athlete can do them.
Absolutely not.
You look at somebody like Jason Brown, who's, in my opinion, the best skater, not the best jumper, not the best necessarily athlete, but the best skater, best artistic skater in the sport. And who is now maybe retired, maybe not, but is not competing at the moment. He's iffy. He has traditionally not been able to throw in quads.
No,
even as good as
never in competition.
Never in competition. He can't land them. And he's one of the best the sport has ever seen.
Right. And was still 6th at the last Olympics, which is insane.
Because his quality is so good. But there are a number of other skaters like a Nathan Chen who basically made it his calling card.
Can do 6 in a program.
That he could do 6 in a program, but never even attempted a quad axel.
No.
Most of the...
Well, he did attempt them, but he just basically at a certain point, he was just like, nope, I am defaulting this to Yuzuru Hanyu because Yuzuru Hanyu has said that is the thing that he wants. And Nathan couldn't do them. So, and that's no dogging on Nathan. I adore him. He's unbelievable, but he couldn't do them.
I mean, Nathan Chen is like this sport's Simone Biles.
Yes.
Right? Like
I would. Yeah, he's a Michael Jordan, Simone Biles type.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. He's a goat. He is a goat. He's going to be thought of as one of the greatest of all time.
Yes. I was just like, the only reason for that reaction was just like, man, she had so many things named after her.
Sure. Gymnastics is a different sport.
I know. I'm sorry.
There's a lot more room to play there, right? For some of these things. So yeah, I mean, swinging back. So we've got this kid who we saw for the first time in
Ilia Malinin, who we saw on the senior circuit for the first time last year. Yes.
And this kid comes out and
looks like you.
Okay, so full disclosure.
It's amazing.
Ilia Malinin is actually kind of difficult for me to watch because he looks exactly like me at like 14, 15. I've never seen another human being so identically close to me.
Creepy.
It's super duper weird. Maybe at some point on our Instagram or something, I'll post some side-by-side photos. But it is like watching a younger version of myself. I'm kind of worried somebody cloned me, but I was never that athletic. So I did have that jumping ability, but not spinning around in the air and stuff like that. Anyway, Ilia Malinin shows up and he immediately has quads for days.
Last season.
Last season. Like tons and tons of quads.
But he is not consistent. This is kind of the line that the United States Figure Skating Association took whenever he was in line to go to the Olympics. And it was sort of between him and Jason Brown. And they went with Jason Brown. And it was a controversial decision. Some people loved it. I am on that team because I love Jason Brown. And it was a sentimental thing, I think, but also they know he's highly respected by international judges. Malinin was an unknown quantity. So it's basically the debate that you'll hear a lot from commentators, especially as you lead up to an Olympics. Like, do you bring the established or do you bring the newbie who has all the heat behind him? So they didn't bring him, but they did bring him to Worlds, and he didn't do quite so well. So that said, about a month and a half ago, at a very, very small international competition, he was there to a crowd of almost nobody in Lake Placid, New York.
The stands were like empty.
Yeah, you can find this on YouTube. It looks completely like an empty stadium, but it counted, and he did the first official quadruple axel in competition. In the record books, his name is there now. So he's already established himself as hey, this is now mine. I own this record. And that's unreal.
Yeah.
But coming into Skate America this year, because he had done that a month and a half ago, it was you could just feel, almost even watching it on TV, the vibration. Is he going to do it? Are we going to see it? Is it going to be real?
Yeah.
Because we heard about it. We saw it, but the video quality is shit. So you're just like, maybe not. I don't know. So this whole competition has an international roster of people that have more experience than him, that have won competitions recently, that are really, really talented. But he was the story. And in the short program, you had...
Well, in the short program, you're not allowed. You're not even allowed to attempt that jump.
No, you're not.
There yet. Because the short program, there's only 3 jumps, and they're highly regimented for what they can be.
Well, there's a jumping combination, a single jump, and an axel.
Right.
But you can't do the quad axel is not one of them. It has to be a triple axel.
Right. For now. And those rules can change over time based on the number of people who can actually do them.
Right.
Because I think quads, even the availability to do quads in the program changed over time, because, it took a while before people could catch up.
All the
and do
rules
them.
are always changing.
Right. It's always evolving.
Right.
That's too much in the weeds.
Yeah.
But in that competition, in the men's competition at Skate America, the short program's kind of a mess. A lot of the competitors are, again, like we said earlier, really filling out what they're doing with their programs. There's a lot of falls. There's a lot of messiness. Ilia is underwhelming. He has some good jumps. He's okay. He's been kind of known in the past for being great at jumps, not great at artistry.
And that's accurate.
Yeah. But his short program's artistry had improved.
It has. It's definitely taken a step in the right direction. And I say the right. It's all dependent on how you feel about skating. I like to see a nice mix of athleticism and artistry. Artistry, to me, would always win out a little bit more. And his needs a lot of work. But he's 17, and he's the quad god, which is his actual Instagram handle. It makes sense that would not necessarily be the priority for him. But in order to compete with the big guys in this sport, he's going to have to do it. And it was nice to see in that short program, like, okay, you have a long way to go, but I can actually see you working on it compared to what I saw last year, which is great.
Then he gets to the free skate. And then the question on everybody's about him.
And he was in 4th?
He was in 4th.
Yes, he was in 4th.
He was in 4th place, which was not, obviously where he was looking to be. There's a lot of names that, aren't going to stand out early on. But, there was a Japanese skater and a South Korean skater.
There's Kaori, who was in 1st, who is an exceptional young Japanese skater. And I mean, there's so many excellent young Japanese skaters. It's absurd. And 2 of the best men's skaters in the world are in Japan, and we're not in this competition. Right.
That no matter quad axel or not, Ilia is going to have a difficult time competing against.
Oh, yes.
But anyway.
But yes, Kaori, who was easily the best in the short program, was in 1st. There's Junyuan Cha, who I really, really hope I'm saying that properly, and I'm going to learn, who is a fantastic South Korean figure skater who has been in it for a long time and is a brilliant artist, was in 2nd. And in 3rd, you had Daniel Grassel, who's from Italy, and for the longest time has been a really kind of under the radar skater. Like you'd see him around, but he was mostly a lot of jumps and not a lot in between. But he has been working with Jason Brown, and you can really see how hard he is trying to evolve.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see him coming into this competition and really making the effort.
Daniel definitely has shown a lot of improvement. He's definitely kind of an awkward jumper. His jumps look very strange in the air.
Yeah.
But there is some nice artistry, and he overall just seems like a really good dude. And he's very friendly with a lot of the American skaters.
He seems very sweet.
So we get into the free skate, and you get to Ilia's free program. Yeah. And the question in everybody's mind, and the question that the press is asking him ahead of time and everything, are you going to throw the quad axel? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? So he goes into the first jumping pass. He goes into the axle. You hear everybody kind of hold their breath for a second. Right. And then if you watched it, if you watched anything on social media, I'm sure you've already seen this. If not, go look this up immediately, because what happens next is Ilia Malinin throws an almost perfect quad axel. He throws something, he's like 2.5 feet in the air, the full 4.5 revolution, absolutely completely rotates it.
Oh, it's bonkers.
Lands it perfectly like butter, and the place loses its damn mind.
I've been watching this sport for literal decades. I remember watching the first quad done by one of my favorite skaters, Kurt Browning from Canada, 1988, a long, long time ago. And all these years later, no matter how many times I have seen a program, and usually if you're a fan, you know this, the big ovations, the big screams, the big responses from a crowd usually happen from an almost perfect program, and they're maybe the last 30 seconds of a program. Like, you'll get cheers throughout, but not those long cheers.
Yeah, like my best example of that is right before pandemic, the last competition before pandemic, Mariah Bell did her Hallelujah.
Oh yeah, at Nationals.
And it was extraordinary. And the last 30 seconds of that performance, you couldn't hear the music because the crowd was losing its mind. It is a nearly perfect performance. It's on YouTube. Go find it. It's one of my I've watched it dozens of times because I love it
beautiful.
So much.
But Malinin lands that quad axel, and he gets that response.
The first jump
To the point where the crowd screams. A few of them start standing, and then it just keeps going until he's in his second jump. So at least 30 seconds, which doesn't sound like a long time, but whenever a crowd is screaming at the top of their lungs for 30 seconds after one jump, it's just crazy. And it's so much fun to watch.
Oh my gosh. I mean, if you had been in the living room with us, we startled our dog because we screamed so loud when it happened in our own living room. You hear Johnny and Tara do it, on screen as well. He goes in the next jumping pass, throws a quad.
Which he said he couldn't even hear the music anymore.
Right. In the interviews afterwards, he's like, I didn't even know it was still playing. I couldn't hear it. It was so loud. He lands the next jump. His third jump, he falls on.
No, he didn't.
Was it?
Mm-mm. He fell on, I think it was the fourth jump. It was later in the program, but he landed because he went into a quad Lutz, and then, he went into a quad toe and then into a quad Lutz, and both of those were perfect. In fact, I think his first 4 jumps were perfectly clean. It was the one following that he fell on.
Okay, so he falls on a later jump, but
I'm getting way too into my nerddom.
Right, but a nice difference from what we've seen in him before is when he falls on that, when he gets back up laughing.
Yes,
because at that point the kid's on like just pure energy high. Right. By the time he lands all of his jumps, everything else is really, really strong. I don't know this for certain, but Jackie Wong, who runs Rocker Skating,
Love Jackie
who
Wong.
is basically the best figure skating journalist in the game, commented afterwards that the rest of the program is just improvised, because by that point, Malinin is running on pure adrenaline. The place is losing its mind, and he's just throwing shit to the wind, right? Like, and watching it at home, I was like, there's no way this is actual choreography. This is just crazy pants at this point. But it's so fun, and he's having a good time, and the audience is having a good time, and
the judges were having a good time.
And the judges were having a good time. He got an enormous score.
Yeah.
He ends up winning the gold for Skate America.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to give a ton of credit to Junwon Cha, who had to follow him. No, Daniel Grassel had to follow him.
Yeah.
And he did okay, but not great.
Yeah.
And then you have Junwon Cha, who did a beautiful program, had some mistakes. Kamiura, beautiful program, had some mistakes.
It kind of fell apart a little bit.
He did.
Yeah.
But he still ended up in second. But the thing that was really interesting, and yes, it would have been kind of a bummer for Ilia to have that unbelievable of a program and not win. And I'm very glad that he won. But it is worth noting, and this is me being again, a little bit of a nitpicker. He only won by 7 points, I think, 7 or 8 points, something in that neighborhood, which is less than a jump. So it shows you that, yes, he beat everyone. And yes, this is his first gold medal in a big international competition. And holy crap, it was amazing. But the reason I bring it up is mostly looking forward to like Skate Canada next week. And you have Shoma Una, who is one of my personal favorite skaters. He is the current world champion. And that guy can score pretty close to like a 300, which, again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but that I think Ilia's score was a 286. So even with the quad axel, he was at a 286. On an average day, Shoma can still beat that without a quad axel. So mostly I say all that stuff just, again, if you're a casual viewer, you might think quad axel means you win. Like, not necessarily.
Right. There's so much more that goes into it.
But go Malinin. I'm very excited for him.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely exciting. And just, I mean, just the craziest thing to see, because in skating, you get a base value for the jump and all of the other things that are judged,
spins, footwork sequences, all that stuff.
Yeah, all those things that can be quantified from a numerical standpoint. You get a base value for it, and then you also get a
grade of execution.
And the grade of execution goes up to like 5 points. And most of the time, you're not going to see people getting to that 5. They're going to be somewhere in the middle if they get downgraded, if it's not performed well, whatever. That quad axel got almost a perfect grade of execution. It was so undeniably badass, so undeniably awesome that an international judging panel who are not going easy on people in this competition.
And especially they're not going to go easy on a young kid who this is his first major international. He's not going to get a lot of love.
He throws a jump so perfect that they have to give him almost a perfect score.
It's undeniable.
Yeah. And even so, although a lot of the rest of it was messy, you couldn't deny the fact that the jumps were extraordinary. The energy of the crowd was insane. And it really gives, and I feel like we've talked a long time about this piece, but it gives a lot of excitement for what's going to happen with Ilia going forward.
Absolutely.
And every audience that gets to see him for this next year is just going to be hoping and begging that he throws that jump in competition, and he may not do it every time.
He may not, and let's just hope that he keeps his head on straight, because that's a lot of pressure.
It's a huge amount of pressure because, and this is a thing we should talk about too with the Grand Prix just starting the new Olympic cycle and this new year, is that a lot of the big names have stepped away, whether they've retired like a Yuzu or are in the limbo of,
like Nathan
Chen or Jason Brown, who may or may not come back at some point, or Vincent Joe, and you also had people like Mariah Bell and Alyssa Liu, who also retired this last year. So a lot of big names left. So now you have a lot of young skaters that are now like in the coronation ceremony to be the new king and queen of their nation. Right.
Right. And the U.S. program is desperately seeking it. And that actually is a really good transition to start talking about the ladies, because the name that you should be listening for a while in the US, and you're going to hear a ton of, is Isabeau Levito.
So when we get into the ladies competition, we have, 3 solid Americans going into that, and a whole host of international skaters along with them, of course. As tends to be the case, especially early in these competitions, is that there's a lot of, if there's 12 skaters, 6 of them are maybe not that great at this point.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of first season in seniors after they just graduated from the juniors, or just skaters that are not necessarily the best of the best, because again, a lot of people have retired. So into this competition, you have about half of the field that are just not going to be factors. And then you have 6 or 7 that are all sort of in the mix. But whenever you're really looking at it, coming in, it was 2 people that had the most attention on them. One of them from the US is Isabeau Levito, who was the national bronze medalist this year, but too young to go to the Olympics. So this is her first Grand Prix season in the seniors. So she came in at 15, I believe, and already has pretty much the weight of the United States Figure Skating Association for the women's program on her shoulders right now, because she is definitely, at this point in the season, at least, the most competitive of the women from the United States.
She made a big splash.
Well, she's beautiful. She's just gorgeous on ice. She's slow. And to be fair, at this Skate America, I didn't notice it as much.
Her speed did look improved.
Yeah, but she's definitely not as fast. And I think it's more evident when she is skating in contrast to the other biggest name in this competition, current world champion, Kaori Sakamoto, who is an incredible women's skater from Japan that has more speed than I may have ever seen any woman in the sport have.
Kaori Sakamoto is explosive on ice. She won bronze. She won the surprise bronze at the Olympics.
She was if you remember, someone that just delighted you and warmed your heart at the women's competition while everything else was melting down. It was Kaori.
Right. And then she went right to the next stage and won Worlds right afterwards and was dynamite. Just absolutely amazing. Kaori Sakamoto is she's one of my favorite skaters on ice right now. As Wen knows that I say around the house a lot, any day that Kaori Sakamoto smiles is a good day. Because,
I love that.
Because she's just got such a great energy. There's such a lightness about her being. She is a powerful skater, an athletic skater.
And just a really unique woman on ice. She's fun to watch because whereas Isabeau comes from the school of a very traditional music box. If you can think of the skater in the music box, the ballerina in the music box, that is what Isabeau Levito looks like in almost every movement, there is nothing against that. It's incredible. It's beautiful to watch. But Kaori has something different and unique and just explosive.
Yeah, I think I like what you said there. Like Isabeau looks like you think a skater in your mind when you imagine an ice skater or an ice dancer, like what they'd be like. And she is that. She is graceful. Her jumps are very, very pretty. She has so much artistry and she has so much poise for somebody so young.
Yeah. At 15, it's really impressive.
Extraordinary poise. So going into this ladies competition, you had them and then you had two other Americans in that competition. One of whom is Amber Glenn. You might know her because she has an extraordinarily huge following on TikTok.
Oh yeah.
She's
social famous.
Yeah, she's social media famous. She's been around. She's 22. She's been on the scene for a long time. She notably had basically a meltdown at nationals of last year.
In the short program, she had one of the single worst programs I've ever seen at nationals, which was extremely sad. And then she tested positive for COVID and then could not compete for the rest of the season.
Right. And basically, and her Olympic dream
was over.
Was over at that point anyway.
Right.
So, and Amber Glenn basically came into this season with something to prove. I have not in the past been a particularly big fan of her skating. She's never really grabbed me with her and I like explosive, storyteller styles, but hers didn't work that well for me. She really turned me around at this competition.
She really did. She came in with such fire and conviction. That is the word I would use for her in both the short and the long program. She really just attacked everything. And while that might seem like, well, if you're a competitor, you should do that. It's like, yeah, in theory. But again, skating, one, is a subjective sport. So even if you are attacking everything, the judges don't always respond. But two, especially after something that was as crushing as that nationals for her, to come back and really not only once, but twice in this first big international, just lay it down as well as she did. She did fall on her triple axel that I know was the biggest thing that she wanted to do. But I don't know. But
she rallied.
Yeah, that's the thing. She fell on the triple axel and then was flawless after that. So her first jump, she fell. You're waiting for oh no, now here comes the next bad performance, if you will. And instead, it was fantastic. It was without flaw. And the judges responded. You could see in the kiss and cry when she's getting her scores, she was waiting for the not that exciting scores and then was blown away that she stayed on the podium because she ended up with the bronze and she absolutely deserved it.
Yes, it was a huge weekend for her. Her short program, again, go seek this out. Go watch it. It's so good. Something that Johnny and Tara said a lot in the commentary on NBC and USA for this stuff was that in a season with no Russians, without Russia as a competitor, and with a lot of these big names retired, these new skaters and these up and comers and these veterans who have just been just outside the spotlight for a long time should be going for the throat. This should be them absolutely going for the throat to make their way up there. And a lot of them felt very tentative. They did not feel like that, but not Amber Glenn.
I agree. It's so frustrating because you watch all of this and you're like, you have the door wide open for you. If you've watched skating for the last, I don't know, in women's skating decade, in pairs and dance, decades plural, Russia dominates. And so whenever they are pulled out of the scenario, why wouldn't the rest of the world come in completely on the attack? For better or for worse, you'd throw it all at the fan. And Amber Glenn did. And you could feel it in her where she's just like, I know nobody here really expects that much from me, and I am going to prove them wrong.
Right. It was fierce. It was attack. It was some of my best or some of my favorite performances from that whole competition.
Completely agree.
And that was such a surprise to me because, like I said, not generally my favorite skater out there, but I was really, really impressed. Isabeau also impressed. Her long had some problems, bobbles that we've never really seen from her before, and not even huge ones. It's not like she fell.
But she's just a notoriously already at 15 consistent skater, and to have those falters really shows that, one, it's early in the season, first competition out, but also, it's a lot of pressure. She's second to the world champion. It's a different world that she's now playing around in. Yeah.
And regardless of how things shake out with it, I don't think nobody on that podium was unhappy with their placement in the end, because when Kaori Sakamoto took the ice, she was extraordinary. She was joyful. She had the crowd on their feet. It's one of the things I love, and we'll talk about this in other episodes, but one of the things I just love about figure skating is that it's not about the team. It's not about the country. It's about the skater in the moment and celebrating what they're capable of and the show that they give for the audience and the judges. And when Kaori Sakamoto got out there, she put on the show.
She did.
It was so much fun, so joyful to watch. Her artistry, her jumps, her energy, all just fantastic. And the audience lost their shit, as they should.
As they always should for her, but especially when she skates something so clean and so polished and so early in the season to come out and really show off what she's got. They like to talk about, you come in with the confidence of a world champion and then, it changes everything. And I didn't see that from all the world champions or the people with world medals. With her, it was obvious. Mm-hmm. It was that, you leveled up and you were already wonderful. And now you're skating with a different level of confidence and it just radiates off of you. It's wonderful.
Yeah, she's an absolute rock star out there. It was a beautiful performance. A great 1, 2, 3 from her to Isabeau to Amber Glenn. And I think everybody was really happy in their placements there because it was all deserved. And even if Isabeau had not had a couple of bobbles, she still would not have matched that score that Sakamoto put up. No. So I think everybody knows it felt very fair. It felt very strong. I want to talk about two other.
Yeah. Before we move on, just really quickly, Gracie Gold. Yeah. I mean, you can't not mention Gracie. She had a lovely short program. She had one fall in it, but it was her triple lutz, triple toe combination was so strong and beautiful and really just lovely to see from her. Especially like if you're a casual viewer, Gracie Gold's probably the name you know.
Right.
She's been skating. She won her first national championship in 2014. She's been around. She was like one of Taylor Swift's besties for a little while. Like she had a lot of commercial deals. Like she's very much like somebody who skating needs in the sport, for lack of a better way to say it. Like skating in the United States is not that popular anymore, as sad as that makes me. But Gracie was one of those faces of the sport that could really push it forward. So having her show back up in 2022, I mean, looking better than I've seen her look, and stronger is what I mean by that, mm-hmm. and more prepared than I've seen her in years, and giving a really great short program was lovely to see. Long program, unfortunately, looked more like what we've seen from her, and kind of, in my opinion, looking like she was getting in her head again. And she struggles with that a lot, which is completely understandable whenever you have, whenever you're fighting yourself, essentially. Like it's difficult. but it's hard not to empathize with her and really, really root for her. And it was unfortunate to see her not do as well as you'd hoped she would, but she still ended up in the top 6, which is not bad at Skate America by any stretch. And I really, really hope she gets another shot at whether it's another Grand Prix insertion so that she gets to fight again there, or just at another Challenger Series event, or if we just see her at Nationals and then she shows up. I know they said her goal for the season is to end up at Worlds. That's a big ask, but I'm rooting for her. I really hope she gets it.
The other skater that I want to highlight is one that we've liked since seeing her last year in like the European competitions, and then she was also at the Olympics. She represents Poland. Her name is Ekaterina Kurakova. She's called Katya. I think she's actually like a Russian expat.
She is.
Who represents Poland. She's
a damn delight.
She is a damn delight. She's not really a podium threat most of the time, but Kurakova is one of the most enjoyable skaters to watch. There is a brightness about her personality, a whimsy to how she skates. She is an entertainer.
Yes.
And I really loved that in the off season, she actually got to be a part of some of the Japanese tours and stuff that like a lot of our American people are off. And we'll talk about those again in another episode.
I know we keep saying this, but there's a lot to talk about.
There's so much to cover, but those things I want to talk about because there's some of the things I think are really great about the sport and the stuff that I wish more of American audiences would get to see. But Kurakova is just a delightful a skater as is out there. I think that the struggle for her is going to be to find more mature material. She's 20 years old, but she's diminutive and she just has this bright, almost like childlike glee to her. And so I think finding some programs that allow her to move a little bit more into a mature zone will be important. But at the same time, what she does, that thing that she does, is really, really fun to watch.
It's very special. I mean, her delivery on ice, and I highly recommend whatever you can find on YouTube. She's just really lovely to watch and just fun to watch. She very much feels like a classic entertainer on ice, and you don't get as much of that these days. So it's fun to watch something that feels like acting and skating at the same time. It's really joyful, and I do hope she evolves more and gets a little bit more consistency, because I think if she could, she'd move up quickly in the sport. But at least at the technical level she's at right now, she won't, but she's still really, really fun to watch. Yeah.
Check out last season's Alice in Wonderland free skate is beautiful. It's worth noting that like at the Olympics, she's a fairly inconsistent skater. And at the Olympics, her short program was a disaster, but she still managed to get into the group that free skate.
She qualified. Yeah.
She qualified for free skate. And then she was like one of the first people to skate. And then she held the top position for like 9 skaters. Mm-hmm. Like everybody who had beaten her in the short couldn't beat her in the free. I think she still ended up in like 12th place.
She did.
But you got to think that was also a competition that had 3 of the Russians and America's best skaters. You know, so you had like 6 spots kind of dominated by some of those. So
and the Japanese skaters
who were also dynamite.
And Koreans.
Right. So 12th is
South Korea has some pretty amazing skaters.
Right. And, you know, Luna Hendricks is in the mix.
Oh, Luna Hendricks, yes.
Who we'll hopefully be talking about here soon when she's in one of our other competitions.
Yes. But I think right now we should probably move on to ice dance, because that was an interesting competition.
Mostly as far as ice dance go, I think we just focus on the 2 American pairs.
I agree, but I do want to give one. I'm going to give a quick shout out before we even move on to it to Muramoto and Takahashi.
Oh yeah.
So randomly, if you are a long time, even casual skating fan, you might recognize the name Daisuke Takahashi. He was an incredible single skater from the early 2010s. Olympic bronze medalist single skater from Japan. Gorgeous, fun, inventive skater that I loved. And then randomly, he just decided, hey, I'm going to be an ice dancer now. So as his senior single skater competitiveness waned, because, you know, jumps sometimes whenever you get older don't work so well, he decided instead of retiring like most do, he was moved on into ice dance. And he and his partner, Kana Muramoto, were just absolutely delightful to watch. They're so entertaining. They have some levels to move up, and That's something, again, YouTube ice dance levels, it's important from the judging standpoint just to understand it. But they have some work to do is really probably an easier way to say it. Regardless, super fun, wonderful to watch, and I cannot wait to see more of them in international competition this year. Yeah. I loved their programs.
Definitely a wonderful pairing. They match up very well and are very, very fun on the ice.
Still so much fun really to see him again.
Yes.
But yes, I agree. The two Americans, and I want to start with Hawayek and Baker, who I love always because they are the sillies of the ice dance sport, I say. If you follow them on social media or you just watch any of their exhibitions ever, they have a wildly goofy sensibility, and I love that they just are authentically themselves out there. I mean, his name is Jean-Luc Baker, and he is named after Jean-Luc Picard. You can't not love the guy, right. At least if you're a nerd like me.
Yes.
And Caitlin Hawayek is just wonderful, and I don't know, I just have a girl crush on her. I love her, and them together are just such an odd pairing. If you look at them, I feel like terrible saying that, but when I first saw them together, it didn't quite make sense to me. And now, especially watching them at this Skate America again, it's that like, oh no, you're perfect. You are absolutely perfect together. And their short program was a Desi Arnaz medley, which I thought was just brilliant because it brought in, again, their humor into competitive programs, which I hadn't really seen them do before.
Right. Yeah. When we see them do exhibition stuff or like, the post-competition skates that, that are just for crowd pleasers, they do some really humorous, goofy stuff. Jean-Luc Baker is like a human Muppet in all the best ways. But they really leveled up in the last year or so. But I've never seen them as good as what they were at Skate America. That retro, Lucy Desi performance was really, really fun. But their free skate,
unbelievable,
extraordinary.
And I want to point out, I know we don't want to go too deep into the weeds. I would recommend just going and watching their free skate if you can. It was absolutely gorgeous and so balanced. That was the word that kept coming to mind. Because of their such similar height on ice, sometimes it can look a little off balance because you sort of in pairs and dance expect the man to be larger. This I loved because it felt like not only were they completely balanced as a partnership, but they were balanced in a much more practical sense throughout this dance. And it was gorgeous to see. It didn't feel like one was leading the other. They were leading each other at all times. And that doesn't happen a lot on ice. It was unique. It was well delivered. And it did not feel like an early season performance.
No, I mean, it looked like something they had already been doing for an entire season. That looked like something you'd be doing at nationals. It was that good.
And I really want to point out something that a lot of casual skating fans might not necessarily notice, but as a long-term one for ice dance, judges don't move the scales for them very often. So what I mean by that is if a skater gets a certain number consistently or a range of numbers, it doesn't move up too quickly. It takes a long time for them to make big leaps. And that's why you often see the same 3 or 4 at the top for a certain period of time, and then slowly one might fall and a new one might rise, and then they retire, and it just happens again and again. Hawayek and Baker beat their personal best by almost 5 points this year at this competition. That is not insignificant. That is very important to look at because that is the international judges have always been kind of hard on them. Them moving them up 5 points in one competition may not sound like much, but that is a big leap forward, just projecting out for the season, because it says the judges like these. They like what you're doing. And in more so than in any other discipline, that matters for them going into nationals and especially going into worlds.
Yeah, an ice dance doesn't have jumps. So you don't have those big explosive point getters.
Correct.
You have lifts and intricate footwork
and
sequences
twizzles.
and twizzles and all this side-by-side stuff. It's a game of inches, right? So one of the reasons why there's such a consistency in scoring is because you don't have a person throwing a quad and then, falling on their ass or landing it perfectly
exactly.
or anywhere in between. So, when you get these ice dancers out there, they tend to give a pretty fairly similar performance time after time. It's just the little details, the little refinements and the little perfections and the little flaws and mistakes are what define that score. So like you said, a 5-point change is everything for them. And that's a big vote of confidence from international judges and also it's worth noting, they've taken bronze in like 4 different big in nationals over the years. And because they've been against some powerhouse competitors in ice dance. So they finally got a silver
at an international. So it's not, so them moving into that position and doing it with such, well, and this kind of leads us into who beat them. And that's Chock and Bates.
Yeah.
And Madison Chock and Evan Bates are frankly, they're the best of the season. They're of this year and this, for as long as they stay in it, it could be the same, but at least for this season, they are the almost foregone conclusion favorites for the Worlds next year. They are a United States team that has been around a long time, and they are brilliant, beautiful, incredible, absolutely magnetic skaters. And Hawayek and Baker ended up only less than a point behind them.
Yeah, it was razor's edge close.
Like you said, it's a matter of inches. Chock and Bates, more so than I think I've seen in years from them, had a lot of those little inches that they gave up.
So Chock and Bates are one of my they're my favorite ice dance pair. Even, over the last couple of years, there's this Montreal school producing extraordinary skaters in ice dance.
It's Hogwarts for ice dancers.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it. Right. Chock and Bates have, they've won nationals, but they're kind of trading back and forth with Hubble and Donahue from previous seasons. They'd kind of jockey for position. And then you had the French pair who
they are so perfect.
Yeah, they are so perfect and and absolutely extraordinary. And also out of that same school, and they're all friends. But they're not competing right now. Hubble and Donahue have retired. Chock and Bates, they're avant-garde, and sometimes their programs have not set perfectly with international audiences. They're always my favorite. I mean, they're always just so cool.
You also have a crush on Maddie Chock.
Like half of the skating world.
As you should.
Right. But this particular, at Skate America, we could see that there is a little bit of just getting to know the new programs. They're still not quite settled into them just yet. 2, I just think that Evan Bates was not feeling well.
Or something. Something was off. It's weird to say this because if you go back and watch these programs, they're beautiful.
They're still beautiful.
They're gorgeous, immaculate, especially their long program is so gorgeous. It's hard to find flaw, but if you're nitpicking, if you're really, really scrutinizing, you can see a twizzle that's off. You can see a lift that doesn't look quite right. And for people that are known to be some of the best in the world, it's unusual. And the thing that I noticed, and so did Adron through this year's programs at Skate America, Evan in both programs just looked uncomfortable or just uneasy. And so we were both trying to conjecture, like, does he not feel well? Was it a bad trip into, Boston for this? Or was it simply they haven't trained enough? I mean, they tour, just like you were talking about with the Japan tours, there were tours all over Japan this summer, and they were on several of them, and they got engaged over the summer. So they're also like celebrating that. Maybe they just don't have enough time to train. Again, still gorgeous, still 100% would not argue them winning any medal ever.
Right. And they still took first place. They're still at the top of the podium.
Win. But if I were going to give a win to someone, in this competition, it absolutely would have been Hawayek and Baker. And I feel like Chock and Bates took it because they're Chock and Bates.
I think maybe the short had a little bit more to do with that, as far as just the score.
The short? Well, no, I felt like the short, they faltered because he missed that one lift.
Oh, yeah, that's true. There was a flaw in there, too.
And he also missed a twizzle.
Yeah. So,
again, it's all inches, not miles. But I also think it's a matter of, like, ice dance is the most political of the sports. And so if you are known to be the best, you're going to get an advantage. And I say this as a humongous fan of theirs. I just think in this particular competition, Hawayek and Baker took it, but they're not going to take it.
Yeah, I expect them to get much, much better as the season goes along.
100%.
The programs are still beautiful and
Absolutely.
so very much them and full of trademark, wonderful stuff from them.
And I will still be sad if they do not win their world title because Maddie Chock, world champion, needs to be a thing.
Right. I absolutely agree. And then, I mean, to loop off of that, and this will be the briefest of the things we talk about, but is pairs. Because I think in the pairs competition, your first and second place are worth talking about, and the rest of them paled by comparison in a big way.
Yeah.
Not to give any disrespect to the skaters because what they're doing is impossibly hard. But if you just looked at the scores competitively, there's a huge drop off from second place.
Yeah.
The Americans,
Alexa Knierim and Brandon Frazier.
Yeah. Alexa and Brandon, they were our world champions last year, which was a very significant happening for American figure skating.
Enormously
like
significant.
The first world gold in like 39 years.
39 years.
Yeah. So
for the United States.
A big win. They're dynamite on ice. They're so great. There were some weaknesses in this.
Similar to Maddie and Evan, it felt like an under-rehearsed or not quite there yet program, especially the long.
Yeah, the long. Alexa had a couple of. I mean, she had a fall and a 2 foot,
2 foot, and even their triple twist, which. If you're a layman or not, sure what that means, it's like if you know the part where a pair just throws a woman way up over his head and she spins really fast and he catches her and puts her down. That's the triple twist, and theirs is usually mind blowing, and these were fine.
Yeah, and I haven't watched the replay of it, but I swear to you, she hit him in the face 4 times during transitions with her legs.
I'm pretty sure she did.
I think he caught a knee to the face like 4 different times.
I know, and they are not that pair. Like, they might not always be perfect, but they are solid. They were 6th at the Olympic Games. They were incredible at the Olympic Games. They were not to the level of the 5 above them, but just in terms of just what they could perform. But the fact that they even came in 6th against the Russian and Chinese teams was absolutely amazing. And so to come into the Olympics without those teams there and win.
You mean the Worlds? The
Worlds, I'm sorry. To come into Worlds without those teams there and to win with all of the pressure on them and do it in style really shows the type of team that they are. And they haven't been together that long. I think 3.5 years, something like that. So in this competition, them having a moment where you're like, she keeps hitting him in the head again and again and again. Like, whereas I can look at Maddie and Evan in the dance and say, I'm not sure what's quite going on there, even though it's beautiful. With the pairs of Alexa and Brandon, I can look at that and be like, you guys just haven't trained this enough. Yeah. It was very obvious.
And they weren't even sure they were going to come back.
Yeah.
So I really feel like U.S. figure skating begged them to come back because the program needed somebody to lead the next generation.
Oh, yeah.
in. And so that was definitely a thing. The other thing, though, in the pairs, in the silver spot, was I thought the bright surprise of this whole competition, which was the Canadian pair.
Deanna Stellato-Dudek and Maxime Deschamps. I hope I'm saying that properly. They were fan-freaking-tastic is what they were.
Some of my favorite performances of the entire Skate America was that pairs team. And it's worth noting, she's like
39 years old.
Yes.
39. And while that shouldn't sound so shocking in skating, that's absurd. She was skating singles in the 90s, took more than 10 years off and changed countries. She used to skate singles for the United States and now she skates pairs for Canada. I'm just in awe of her. Like, she is as badass as they come. I am so impressed. And they came out similarly to Hawayek and Baker looking like they were trained. They were ready. There was no first of the season jitters or not quite prepared yet moments. They looked sharp and beautiful.
And much like a Madison Chock who sells every moment on the ice, Deanna is such a bright personality on the ice. Like, sold every moment of it. Her joy, her excitement, her determination. So well paired. I was so floored by their performances, so floored by their energy and their personalities and everything about it. I just thought they were one of the best portions of the entire Skate America. So much of the pairs was pretty forgettable for me. Even as we were making notes for this episode, I had a hard time recalling anybody else.
It was a little rough.
Yeah, but they are the bright spot in my mind.
100%.
So it's interesting to me that both, like, even though some really great people took first in pairs and in dance, it's the silver performances are the things that I'm going to hold on to afterwards.
Absolutely.
That I think were the best.
The one thing I'll say, though, and this is mostly a clarification because judging in figure skating is so complicated. I also can look at the pairs competition and see that the silver medalists were absolutely more entertaining and clean and beautiful. However, Alexa and Brandon winning wasn't terribly confusing because they started with a higher level of difficulty.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like skating can sometimes lose people. They were like, well, this team did perfectly and this other team won. Why does that? How? And they weren't perfect. And it's that Alexa and Brandon came in at a higher level of difficulty. So even with some mistakes and with an advantage from the short program that they had, that makes up the difference. But I mean, frankly, the second place team, the Canadians, were not terribly far behind. So that really, it's good that puts the pressure on Alexa and Brandon going into Worlds because they are fighters. I was getting a little worried about the pairs discipline in general this season. Like, is it going to be interesting at all? Now, seeing those two teams compete against each other, and there's the Japanese team that whose names are eluding me off the top of my head right now, but they're going to be at Skate Canada next week. There's a fantastic Japanese team as well. It's shaping up to be a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be. But that actually takes us into like what we'll be talking about next week, which is Skate Canada. And for me, that equals Shoma Uno.
Shoma is one of the most exciting male skaters out there. He won Worlds last year. He was, he
is the reigning Olympic bronze medalist in Pyeongchang in 2018. He took the silver. He is absolutely one of the most gorgeous skaters to watch. He's so lyrical and unique and just fun to watch.
When we talked earlier about Ilia Malinin having to up his like artistic game.
Oh, he can't touch Shoma right now.
Shoma's artistry along with his jumps are brilliant. He's the guy that's been just in the shadow of Yuzuru Hanyu and Nathan Chen for a number of, the last Olympic cycle, essentially.
Two Olympic cycles.
He's that guy who's so good. He just happened to be, he's the Ryan Lochte, right? Like he's the guy, except for like much cooler than Ryan Lochte.
Yeah, let's please clarify.
Yes. But Lochte was the guy who would have been the greatest swimmer of all time, except for he swam at the same time as Michael Phelps, right? That's the same thing with Shoma Una, is that like that he hit, the goats were in the competitions with him.
Yeah.
And in any of those given days, he could almost take them,
and did a couple of times.
So he's a guy that I think, at least the last time we saw him, is at the top of his game.
Yeah.
He's an extraordinary skater.
His biggest issue is that he tends to be a bit inconsistent. He can be the absolute best or he can fall apart.
Yeah.
So in the past couple of years, though, he has been fairly consistent. Like, not as consistent as someone like a Chen, but I think he's getting there. And I do feel like, at least what I'm seeing so far of him this season, the world championship glow seems to be appearing around him, where it's like his confidence level's up. So if that continues, he's going to be scoring in the 300s, which for layman's terms means he's going to win, or he's going to at least be very, very tough to beat.
The Skate Canada is going to be really interesting. Some of the people who competed in Skate America will be there, but I think mostly it's going to be a completely different slate of skaters. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those other international names there and seeing what happens next with it. I think Skate America, though, was a great kickoff to this competitive season.
It really was, especially post Olympics, because this is the ennui. It's the the Olympics are over and now I guess there's some skating because you're losing all of the names you knew and you're starting anew, and it should be exciting, but sometimes it just feels a little sad. And Skate America gave me hope. It really did. It was that like boost of energy of Malinin's going to keep this real interesting. Chock and Bates have always been gorgeous and are going to keep being gorgeous. And then you have this fresh crop of people who have either been in the shadows for a while or are brand new, who are ready to take the sport and just keep running.
And hopefully we'll also see some underdogs surface and like, and just level up over this season.
I really hope so.
Because, you know, you always hope that there's some surprises. There are the people who, sports journalism in particular tends to latch on to one or two people and to beat you over the head with their names. And I'm always excited when there's some of the other ones that appear and rise up and become notable. So I'm looking forward to see, you know, who some of them are. There's definitely a few people in like the American organization that are kind of waiting in the wings that have been very, very good. People like a Camden or
and Camden's going to be Camden Buchanan's going to be it's Canada.
Yeah,
so.
or like a Lindsay
Thorngren.
Yeah. So, you know, there are other competitors out there that are not being talked about a whole lot, but that do have a lot to bring to the table. And hopefully we'll get to see that. But with all that being said, so this has been the first episode of Scoreography. We're definitely a little loose in getting our feet underneath us with this, but I'm hoping that you've enjoyed our commentary and that you'll stick around for more episodes.
And even more importantly, and in a completely earnest way, I hope it encourages you to go seek out some of the stuff we've been talking about and watch it if you can find it, because it is hard on YouTube. But do your best Googling and try to find some of these skaters and support them, because skating in the United States especially is struggling to find an audience. So one of the hopes with this show is to help, you know, do our tiny part to encourage casual fans to rediscover their love of it. Because skating in the 90s, if you were watching it then like I was massive. You had stadiums filled with 20,000 people screaming for Kristi Yamaguchi. It doesn't happen as much these days. So this is us playing our little part in trying to help boost the signal as much as our voices can, and hopefully encourage people to just find something new and fun and exciting to watch.
Yeah, I would like to see a lot more of these arenas look like Skate America did.
Yeah.
Because Skate America had a full audience and it looked awesome. A lot of these regional competitions don't have nearly as many people. The skating is so huge in Japan and some in Korea.
Massive.
Like they have
South Korea, massive.
They're rock stars there. Here, it's a footnote, you know, when we have the big team sports that seem to dominate everything. But yeah, like I said, we just want to see American figure skating get celebrated more here in the States, but also just to get a big appreciation for all of the international skating, because it's one of the best parts of this sport is the way the international community is knitted together through skating and the friendships that it generates, the fandom crossover that's there. So all of that is what we're about. Again, this show is very, very new. Even as we put this out, our website will be just going up and our socials will just be starting. But you will be able to find us at scoreography.show is the website for it. Scoreography on Twitter, Scoreography on Instagram, Scoreography on TikTok, although who knows if we'll actually use that in any real meaningful way.
It's going to take a bit.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. We're in our 40s, people. TikTok is weird. But
it's cool, but we just don't understand it. So
yeah.
my take.
And we will eventually be on all of the Apples and Googles and all the podcast places and stuff. The show will be submitted and we'll get there. So maybe by the time you hear this, it'll be there. But scoreography.show will definitely be the first point of entry to be able to listen to stuff. And then it'll hit all of your podcatchers and stuff very soon.
Yes. And if nothing else, please do some homework and go find Ilia Malinin's Quad Axel and revel in that audience reaction for just a little bit. It'll make your day.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. For Scoreography, I'm Adron Buske.
And I'm Wendy Buske.
And hopefully you'll join us for the next episode.